You thought you had issues?
You've been shot at in a train wreck?
I love my country.
Wait until you hear this.
I required that as a requirement.
1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah.
She calls you a liar.
I can't lie about facts.
Tom Jordan?
Great to be with you, Tom.
You don't strike me as someone who's clutching your pearls.
Major issues there.
I don't have pearls.
Tom Jordan's Got Issues.
Oh, do I ever. Come on, you do too. You know it. These are times in which we live. The issue that I'm dealing with right now is how to decipher the back and forth, the differing expert opinions on the often cited science and data that backs the decisions to provide or not to provide protection during an emergency, like from this highly contagious coronavirus. In a nation that is so accustomed to things like civil liberties, individual freedoms, and rights to assemble, those types of things. I mean, hearing things like this from Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer were pretty jarring for a lot of people.
All public and private gatherings of any size are prohibited.
That was in early April. That has been extended multiple times, that stay home, stay safe order. She has cited her reliance on the data and the science for these decisions. Fair enough. We are seeing a growing divide, though, on how to handle this pandemic, the likes we have not seen since the Spanish flu more than 100 years ago, while the economy is plummeting right now further into a hole that we, in our lifetime, unless you lived during the Great Depression, have never seen. It's a massive problem. As I mentioned, it's a global problem. Here in the United States, we have a kind of a balancing act. How does a time or a declaration of an emergency fit in with something like the Constitution, and specifically with the Bill of Rights? Some have claimed that this is the wake-up call that we Americans needed, that we're just too obsessed with freedom.
There is a primordial American tradition going back to the founders of being freedom obsessed to the point that we are always so afraid of the government coming for us that we are blind to other types of threats, whether it's a virus, whether it's bank malfeasance, or climate change, what have you.
That's an MSNBC commentator on the Morning Joe program. What he's saying there is that the priority of freedom is making us blind to the real threats that are out there. He says there is a primordial obsession with freedom in this country. The word primordial, by the way, means from the beginning. In other words, since the founding of this country, we've had freedom, and that's been a priority. We've been obsessed with it. That's a long time, though, to expect freedom in this country. But there's a reason that individual freedom has remained in the United States for all these years, hundreds of years. It's the law of the land. It's a unique attribute of this country. Freedom is greatly supported still today, and was a big part of this country's founding, as shown in the Declaration of Independence and, of course, the U.S. Constitution. But there are exceptions. In times of war, for example, there are times when it becomes necessary to temporarily suspend those rights, right? Well, that is the real issue I've got right now. What does the Constitution actually say? Some iteration of a phrase that uses the word Constitution is bantied about so often, we kind of get confused. What is constitutional and what is unconstitutional? Here's Governor Gretchen Whitmer with Roberta Jacina and me on WWJ.
Each of these actions was well within our constitutional requirements.
She says the Constitution allows for it. It requires this. A lot of experts actually agree with that, but not this constitutional expert.
There's nothing close to a precedent for all of this in American history. It's one thing to require a vaccination. It's another thing to confine most of the nation to house arrest and shutting down half the economy. And
the virus is still in Michigan. The governor is saying that as long as it is present, we will be in some form of this lockdown. Well, the experts say the virus is never going to go away. It is here for the long term, for the duration, maybe forever. So how do we deal with this? That, by the way, was Dr. Tom West with Hillsdale College. Much of the justification has been a result of comparing this fight to a war. Wars give governments pretty broad powers, but for how long can a government have these broad powers? How long does a war last? How long does an emergency last? That is our issue today. the different interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. I'm speaking with two constitutional experts, one from the University of Michigan, Richard Primus. He's the Theodore J. St. Antoine Collegiate Professor of Law, teaches the law, theory, and history of the U.S. Constitution. We'll get his take on this, his interpretation of the Constitution, to find out if what is being done right now falls in line, in the parameters, in the framework what the Founding Fathers had envisioned. And with his interpretation of the Constitution, I also speak with Dr. Adam Carrington from Hillsdale College. He's a professor of politics with the Van Andel Graduate School of Statesmanship.